Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and yesterday was a bit of a three buses all coming at once sort of day in terms of political news. The government have been found to have acted unlawfully in the High Court. Again, the Brexit talks have not resolved anything as ministers kick the can down the road again. And in Parliament, Keir Starmer was attacking Johnson for failing to follow through on one of his own plans. Again, in this case to help children whose learning has been hit by the pandemic. Johnson in return said that anyone whose children don't go to private school are essentially lazy. But is Starmer having the same success in PMQs as he was last year? And if not, what might he need to do to change it back? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, it's going to be a Labour-centric, this one, again, I'm afraid. So, it was another week where Keir Starmer and Labour should have been beating Johnson and his Conservatives with the Brexit bat. Another week where he picked an important but not a breakthrough topic to discuss. You know, the pathetic level of funding that Boris Johnson has offered for what was his idea was the target of yesterday's attacks. And this is important. I talked about it myself a few days ago, that our government appointed an accepted expert, a genuine expert, to come up with a scheme to help children catch up with their studies after a pandemic-battered year and a bit. Was a good move. One of the few things we could, in theory, actually applaud the Prime Minister for. I say in theory because with Johnson, you never get too excited about a plan that he is announcing. It would have been good news had almost any other Prime Minister announced it, but not this one. When the plan was revealed, Starmer pointed out that the Treasury would only stump up 10% of what was needed and that Johnson rolled over to have his belly tickled by the Chancellor. He didn't actually put it like that, but words to the effect. I'd have put it like that. Goodness knows, if you're not going to go hard on Brexit, by far and away the easiest stick to beat the Conservatives with right now, you might as well get your digs in where you can. Everyone knows Rishi Sunak is after the top job. Couldn't be more obvious if he wore a badge saying next Prime Minister on his jacket. The Chancellor is the most senior member of the government, barring the Prime Minister himself. And yet we hardly see him. Hardly ever see him. You know, think about past Chancellors. They were always there, ever present, ever large. He, don't even know who he is. He pops up now and then when he's got something good to announce. And then he scuttles back to the shadows to avoid being around when the government are starving kids or killing grannies. He's being very careful only to be associated with the popular policies so that he has a clean slate when the time comes to replace Johnson. And there are so few popular policies, that's why we don't really see him very much. Of course, before Johnson can be replaced, Labour have to overtake the Conservatives in the polls and stay ahead. So Starmer's attempts this week, whilst ignoring the huge ammunition dump in the rapidly collapsing Brexit landscape, is to point at the fact that our government is only prepared to spend 50 quid a child when the United States is spending 1,600 and the much less wealthy Netherlands is spending 2,500. These are the comparisons that were flying around last week and I used them myself. Something I didn't point out was that the expert that Johnson appointed was only asking for effectively £500 a child. So even if the government had actually backed their own commission, you could still have made those comparisons and says this represents a very unambitious programme of catch-up. It's like the Americans are wanting to spend £1,600 a child on theirs. The Netherlands, £2,500. We're just spending £500. That doesn't sound very good. But, you know, and so it would be a third of what the Americans were allocating, a fifth of what the Dutch plans were. But no, we couldn't even rise to that. But in the wider context of flipping the polls, which is all I care about right now, see, the overriding importance in Britain right now is to get rid of this populist authoritarian government with all haste. We can't get rid of it before a general election, that's years away. And it doesn't happen overnight. But it does need steps. It's no good just waiting for the election and hoping Labour come good. The first step is getting rid of Johnson himself. I seriously mean that. It's not working out how to defeat them in the next election. Here's the thing. If he's still the leader come the next general election, it means the Conservatives still see him as an electoral asset. They are unlikely to be wrong about this. I know they were wrong with Theresa May, but she was untested. Johnson has already gone through an election campaign. They know what they're getting with him. The Conservatives do not consider loyalty a virtue unless it suits them. If Johnson is costing them in the polls, they will drop him. You won't believe how quickly they'll drop him. There was starting to be discussions, open discussions about replacing him last year when the polls were not looking good for him. It's only gone away, and it has gone away because the polls are now looking better. So the first step to getting rid of him is to make sure that Johnson is a blight, not a boon to the Tories. So I judge everything Labour does through that lens. Yes, they can talk about what they would do. I wish they would talk more about what they would do in government. They need to do that. But right now, it's what are you going to do to put pressure on Boris Johnson? And that includes PMQs. See, last year, Starmer didn't put in a single bad performance. It all worked really well. Yes, he steered clear of Brexit, but that was tactically astute. There was nothing to be done about it at that point. It would only make him look weak. And Johnson was desperate to talk about Brexit. I keep saying, it's like in sport, always do the opposite of what your opponent wants you to do. Johnson wanted to talk about Brexit. Starmer forced Johnson to fight on the ground of his choosing. And it worked really well. This year it's been a little different. Not radically different. Most PMQs still see Starmer exposing Johnson badly. But there have been a couple of bad performances. I don't want to read too much into things, but is it because he's holding himself back over this Brexit madness? Because I think about it in terms of, when I did martial arts when I was younger. Now, my favourite was always judo because you didn't hold anything back. You put in maximum effort without risking injury to one another. In karate or jiu-jitsu, you couldn't do that. Otherwise, you would knock bells out of each other. You were always holding something back. It was like a self-inflicted block that stopped you expressing yourself fully, and I found it impossible to do my best. Because you always had in the back of your mind, I can't actually go full force here. So for all the attacks on Starmer's strategy, if we can call it that, on Brexit, and I'm as vocal as many against it, we know he isn't a Lexiteer. See, when Corbyn went soft on it, we knew that's because he opposed the EU. Not for the same reason as the Tories, but then different groups of Tories have different reasons as well. But Starmer is pro-European. That he is going soft on the very obvious consequences is strategic. It's not because he's indulging his own political inclinations. It's not because he personally doesn't want to talk about it. It's strategic. He's convinced that it's bad to talk about it right now. Now, strategic doesn't mean clever, by the way. Although I'm certain Labour are playing a long game here, I don't think it's the right one. If you thought that the way to win power was simply to get the general election campaign right in 2024, or 2023 if it goes badly, then absolutely play the long game. Of course you do. But like I said, I think there are steps along the way. Yesterday's PMQs was decent enough in terms of what it is generally supposed to do. Starmer even trapped Johnson into basically saying that if your kids don't get private education, then you are lazy. You are failing to provide for them. You're bone idle. He actually said private tuition came as a result of hard-working parents. So if you don't have private schooling for your kids, you're lazy. But what impact does this have on the public? Remember that half of the most senior members of the government wrote a book that described British workers as the laziest in the world. The same people who voted in significant numbers for these politicians are considered lazy by the very politicians whom they voted for. And yes, the polls right now are because people approve of Johnson's handling of the pandemic. So far this year, he's getting a lot of brownie points for the vaccine rollout and the easing of a lockdown that was only needed because to be this long and severe anyway because of him. And yes, come autumn, it will no longer be the poll boost for him that it is right now. We might almost say that the pandemic made Johnson and he'd be lost without it. But that's no reason not to force the issue. Because what if something else happens in election year? What if there's another emergency and Johnson uses it to rally the public around the leader again? Labour have got to work out how to hurt Johnson. I don't understand how Starmer did it on an almost weekly basis last year and only now and then this year. And that's why I'm starting to think, is it because every attack he launched at the Conservatives last year made total sense and he could go with it? He was free to go with it. Whereas this year, he knows that the thing to talk about is Brexit, that it's something that the Conservatives are failing very badly. but he's convinced that it is damaging to him, to his party, or to his electoral chances if he goes like that. Is it that holding him back that's preventing him cutting through? Or is it something else? Whatever the reason, if something doesn't work, and it consistently doesn't work, you don't give up after the first attempt, but if it consistently doesn't work, it's got to be changed to get the desired result. See, I remember Johnson's first PMQs against Starmer. I remember the first couple. He was absolutely battered by the experience. For the first time, he was up against someone who absolutely cut through his crap. But then Johnson changed his approach. This is the point where he just decided to brazenly tell the most ridiculous lies. Obvious lies. Keir Starmer could be holding something up, a government document, and Boris Johnson would just deny what it said on that paper. We could all look it up and see for ourselves what it said. He'd just brazen it out. He knew most people wouldn't. You know, and he kept it up because at the end of the day, he had to. He was forced to. He was crashing and burning by sticking to any sort of previous norms, by being cagey about his lies. Starmer was cutting through, so he had no choice. It was a ruthlessness that wins in politics. I'm not saying Starmer should lie. I'm not saying be like that. Good heavens no. But he does need to be ruthless. His current approach to PMQs is exposing Johnson, but it's not cutting through anymore. Johnson has, if you'll pardon the expression, basically vaccinated himself against it. So Starmer needs a new variant. Try something new. And frankly, when the polls look like they do, which isn't very rosy, it's not exactly going to go badly, is it? How can you say it's going to go badly? Because I understand, like, if people are riding high, then they don't want to change things for fear of losing it all. It's like, well, I'm doing really well now. I don't want to change too much. But when things aren't going well, give it a punt. What have you got to lose? Nothing. Nothing at all. The aim of the game is to stop Johnson looking confident and assured. If Johnson looks confident and assured, even if you're exposing him, if he's not flapping about it, and sometimes he is, but if he's not flapping about it, you haven't done the job. Use a different approach. If that doesn't work, or if it initially does work, but then he gets used to that, you switch it up again. Got to keep doing that. But those are my thoughts anyway. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.